Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, tell our listeners what our second seminar episode is going to cover.
So today we're following up on our last seminar episode from last week upon the funding of new musicals, and we're joined today by a couple of seasoned Broadway actors and educators to talk about how talent paychecks impact the cost of producing on Broadway. So we want to welcome Michael Jablonski and Kimberly Sava to the Dr. Broadway Podcast. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome. We've been laughing because we're doing this at what seems like the middle of the night because we are all putting our toddlers to bed. Yeah. Michael and I go back, 3-4 years here, but my favorite thing is everybody knows I have twins, but they all are in love with your son, Penn. They call him their friend Penn, and you are friend Penn's daddy, and you are friend Penn's mommy, and that is how we refer to you in our household. So this has been really fun.
It's so crazy because they met once.
I know. They really haven't been together that often, but it's so funny, like how they're like, no, this is who these people are.
They're little elephants, It's like
it's kind of hilarious.
But
and the crazy lives that we run. We've been living in the same city now for 6 months, and
I know.
It's like impossible to get together.
I know. It is just what it is. I mean, Michael and I run past each other's offices, and we both go, hi, as we run.
I'm always walking by, and I'm like, hey, Trace.
Hey. And that's what we got. But talk to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career. Introduce yourself to our readers and tell us about your career on Broadway and how you've made it here to the illustrious city of Orlando. How's that?
Sure. My name is Kim Sava. My married last name is Jablonski. I was most recently in Beetlejuice on Broadway. I was in the ensemble and I covered the leading ladies. And before that, I was in Matilda the musical, the first national tour. And then I've done a plethora of regional theaters all over the country.
And you're always gone. You're always doing stuff.
I know.
It's amazing.
I feel really lucky. I think my career really was right place, right time, and just the lack of giving up. Just real stubborn. I was like, I'm going to be here until I'm there. And I was,
It's a kind of testament. I don't think people understand how much of it takes that kind of commitment. Like, there are so many people out there fighting for it. And how quickly they give up tends to be the deciding point on whether or not they're going to continue. It's interesting.
It's not just about talent to be a working actor. I wish I could say it's just based on talent. It's not. It really is how much you can handle no. And some of the most talented people I know work regionally, either because they didn't want to stay in New York because that lifestyle is really, really hard. Or they just were like, I have stable work here in my city. I can have a family. It's really stable. And I'm always working and I never have to hear no.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to make it as a performer in New York on Broadway, you have to be, at least I was, put through the ringer a little bit. And I mean, it's worth it. It's worth it. Doing theater is a beautiful thing. It's just really hard, really tough, But we made it here and we have a family and a beautiful home. And Michael's got a stable job. And I am mostly a stay-at-home mom now, for the most part, doing part-time work here and there.
But you're working in the industry in a different facet.
I'm working in the industry in a different facet. I'm working in the corporate world, and I do more of like producing and stage management, which I actually really enjoy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just to be on the other side of the table, kind of in the back.
Yeah.
It's really enjoyable.
Cool. Michael, talk a little bit about your journey.
Um, yeah, I'm Michael Jablonski. Married to Kim Sava. Yeah, my journey, like, if I wanted to, like, right now I'm currently the head of the musical theater program at University of Central Florida. I transitioned into the academic world in 2017, 2018. And I've been on that journey, which I really enjoy because I get to teach students what I do. I also don't always share this with them, but I am glad I was in the industry when I was in the industry. I think the industry is very difficult now
Yes.
because of how flooded it is. It was still very competitive, through the 22 years I was in the industry, but it's even more challenging today, especially also too with Broadway shows only running some of them for 3, 4, 5 months, even, and that's a successful run sometimes.
Yeah.
Not financially,
Nope.
but for an actor to, when you're working on a show that's a successful regional gig in New York. But yeah, I've done 3 Broadway shows. I did Book of Mormon, West Side Story, and the original production, the only production of Crybaby on Broadway. And then I toured a lot. I did 11 national tours, and then I performed a lot regionally. And I also performed internationally with West Side Story. That was all. I was actually a union member at that time, but international tours were not part of Actors Equity, so that was technically a non-union experience. Luckily, I was in the industry for a long time, so I had a lot of things written into my contract. So my contract was basically a union contract, but so I knew how to stand up for myself. I was on, some of the younger performers in there didn't have that things in their contract. So luckily, there were a few of us on that tour that stood up for what was needed. Sometimes we were taken care of, okay, but there were things that we had to step up for.
Yeah.
But yeah, was in there, and then yeah, now I'm here in Orlando teaching, and we have a family, doing the thing. Trying to find work-life balance, which is impossible, but still doing it.
Absolutely impossible. Yes.
I still direct and choreograph professionally, primarily in the summers, in between the summers, or like in between the semesters. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Well, I would say just in listening to your biographies, there are about 67 different, or 6, 7. You can tell I have middle
Oh God,
schoolers.
please no.
They're about, believe me, I know. They're about,
For a choreographer that has to always say 5, 6, 7,
oh, I
8.
bet you hear it a lot.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, there are so many different ways that I would love to take this conversation, because I would love to hear about so many different things. Particularly, Kim, you talking about how you're doing different kinds of work that are still theater adjacent, right? And
Yeah.
and I love that, because I think that theater graduates need to know that there are so many different ways to use your degrees. And so I would love to hear about that. Michael, I would love to hear about your transition into the academic world from the, professional acting world, because that they are very different universes. And so I would love to hear about that leap. So there are so many ways to take this conversation, but in order to keep the task at hand, I'm going to remind our listeners of what we talked about in our prior seminar, which was we had a couple of fellow doctors. We had Emily Green with us last time, and Michael DeWatley, and they were talking about some research that they had done about what it is that makes particularly the West End a very hospitable place to develop a musical, and why that is. And so if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to that seminar episode, because that we're going to build on that conversation in this episode. If you know the broader work of the Dr. Broadway podcast, you know that we've been going through shows and doing deep dives into them, and more and more and more, Tracey and I are talking about the economics of Broadway and how, in many ways it seems completely unsustainable. But at the same time, we can look back in the historic record and know that there were people sounding the alarm in 1961 saying this is completely unsustainable, and yet somehow it has been sustained. So this is an ongoing conversation, but we want to use our time with Michael and Kim tonight to talk specifically about, something that they can bring to this conversation as performers. So we found out in our last seminar why the West End is an attractive place to develop a musical, but now we're going to talk about that off-beaten rhetoric that producers always cite, which is the cost of Broadway talent. And Kim and Michael are so uniquely positioned to add to this conversation. So Tracey, why don't you take us off as we continue to delve into this topic?
No, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about equity and what it does and how it manages the cost of Broadway talent technically? I love it. This one. Go, Michael, go.
He's like a handbook.
This is why I called him.
I think, well, actors' equity in general, I think for one thing that we keep saying it's a union, it's really an association.
Okay.
And one of the main things that is problematic with actors' equity with regards to costs and this and that is the fact that we really have no power. As the only place we actually do have power is Broadway, in like when I talk like negotiation power,
Yeah.
and it's the only place where I don't think producers are willing to go non-union, but the touring market, regional, this and that,
International, all of that is done
all
by
of those things.
non-union. Yeah.
I was actually on a national tour in 2001, when The Music Man was the first show to go straight from a Broadway Tony Award winning show and go straight out onto a national tour as a non-union tour. And it
rocked the world.
I mean, it freaked everybody out. And I signed petitions and I had friends that were on a non-union tour, and they were saying, well, you did non-union tours. I did 2 non-union tours before I joined the union.
Yeah.
But when I did non-union tours, I did a national tour of Brigadoon, that was that wasn't on Broadway forever, and even when I did the Victoria non-union tour, that was actually the extension, like the union tour was closing, and to extend it, they moved it to non-union. So that's different than when a Broadway show goes straight to non-union.
Yeah.
So it raised a lot of red flags, and for me personally, I was like, well, yeah, you have no say. Like, a producer can do whatever they want. There's no stipulation with regards to a tour has to be union. So I've always thought that the union has really missed the mark in utilizing Broadway as a negotiation tool for a broader spectrum of like how to maintain. And I was on the committee that created the tiered contract.
Okay.
Back when that happened. And then we went to special agreement tours, and then they said we were never going to have them. Now they're back, and now they're creating this whole new book of touring. They're trying so hard to figure out how to gain that negotiating power. But Broadway's really the only place that they have that strength. So it's I'm going off like on a tangent a little bit, but I think that when we're looking at the cost, I think that the union in general has a little bit misguided direction in how they negotiate. I've actually talked to Luis Boise at Equity a few years back. I like to share this because this is actual facts. When I was doing Book of Mormon on Broadway, my salary I was around 21-25 a week. I think the minimum was like 2050, or maybe it was like 2200. I was in that range, right around there. Really good salary, and
But what comes out of that, Michael?
well, I'm gonna talk about this in a second.
Okay.
Well, granted, you have federal taxes, state taxes, but the biggest problem in New York is you then have the city tax. So you're taxed about 40% when you're doing a show in New York, when you're working in New York. So 40% of that is gone. Then you're also paying, many people have an agent, then you're also paying 10% of the salary before taxes. So I was paying $220 a week to my agent, plus 40% was gone. You really had to be strategic with your taxes, because when tax season came around, we had a lot of job search related expenses that allowed us to gain some of that back. And you needed to do that because you weren't making enough to survive in New York. Now, I was fortunate enough when I was doing this that I was smart when I was early on in my tour, that I bought an apartment and was living at a very low cost because my mortgage was very low. But I know friends that were paying double what I was paying to live in New York City. So anyway, so moving forward, when we were on the Matilda National Tour together, I was the dance captain and swing of the tour, and that was a tiered contract.
Okay.
On that contract, my salary was $16.75 a week. So I was making like $600 to $700 less a week on that tour. I share these because my take-home pay was $40 different.
Wow.
But then you have to deal with taxes in all the states.
But what I'm saying is, but what I'm saying in the basis, I was making $700 more on Broadway than I was on the tour of my salary, and I was only making $45 more take home pay after taxes, after agent fee, after all that. And I called the union and I said, we keep arguing for salaries. We keep raising salaries. What you're doing is you're putting actors into a higher tax bracket.
Right.
So you're now paying more taxes than you were when you were making less. So I'm not actually taking home more money. I'm just paying more taxes is all I'm doing. So I think the union needs to be more strategic about how they're negotiating. And because when the news comes out, everybody wants to hear, well, over the next 5 years, there's a 6% raise in salary, or that's the for lack of better terms, the money, like the money line, right? And instead, because it's not fancy. Like now, if they said in the negotiation, we're going to actually have the producers pay double or triple into the pension and health fund, now you're going to make insurance much better, much more stable, and especially with a union where it's one of the only careers where you actually will have health insurance when you're not working.
Yeah.
Because of the way the health insurance works. But when I joined the union in 2000, you needed 10 weeks of health insurance, 10 weeks to get a year of health insurance. It changed to 12 weeks, then 20 weeks. Now it's impossible to get even more than 6 months at a time.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that I saw in my research, was that it was the cost of health insurance, and just health insurance specifically, was becoming a bit of an issue. If you listen to our last episode, we talked about the fact that one of the reasons it's very, very lucrative to start in the West End is because they are not having to negotiate health insurance in any way, shape, or form for especially the union in England. But one of the things that I found was because of the impact that COVID had on jobs on Broadway and everything, some of these numbers I think are pretty messed up, because Equity stopped reporting how many weeks their members were working every week. They stopped doing that in 2000. So prior to 2000, their average number of members working per week was about 5,200 of 20,000 members that were working out of 52,000 actual Equity members. Kim is
say that
looking.
again. You said so this is 2000. I'm just trying to see it in my head.
So
there's
in
52,000 Equity members total.
Yeah,
And in any given week, how many are working?
In 2019, 2020 years time frame, there were 52,000 Equity members. There were 41,000 of them were members in good standing, so they had paid their dues. Of that, only 20,000 of them had reported that they worked that year at all.
Wow.
The average number of weeks worked for one of those 20,000 people was 13. And essentially, we all understand that this doesn't happen. Actors don't work every single week of the year, but the average number of members that were working each week was only 5,200. They stopped reporting those numbers and the average numbers of weeks worked completely, and the number of members working after the pandemic, mostly because they have shrunk, obviously, considerably, and it makes sense why they're not reporting those numbers. But even if you look at the numbers that you had beforehand, before the pandemic hits, it almost becomes impossible for folks to earn health care being an actor, even if they're on Broadway, because the latest thing, I went digging in there in the Actors Equity online portal. It's all forward facing, so it's not like I could actually dig too far. But you need 10 weeks every season, which is a changing number. It's not like over the year. You need 10 weeks a season to get 6 months of health insurance.
But that's only catastrophic care. So there's 3 levels of insurance.
Interesting.
There's emergency care. So there's 3 levels we went through this with Kim when she was doing Beetlejuice, because after the pandemic, they changed the insurance plans. So now you can...
They had to, because...
Yeah, it was decimated. Because they didn't plan.
Yeah.
Well, nobody thought a pandemic was just going to slip on in there. But
yeah.
But if they would have been negotiating, instead of less salary, having people put more into the pension and health fund, then they would have had more money in the pension and health fund, But Kim was, if you remember, when you were doing Beetlejuice, so I don't know the exact, I'd have to look at there's like a formula. There's 3 levels of insurance. The first level, like level C or whatever, level 3, whatever it's called, is the basic. But it's like basic care. Like and it's high deductible, and it's if something major happens, you have some type of coverage. Nobody wants to be on that. The next level is level B or level 2 or whatever it is. It's comparable to like a super, super, super high deductible plan. And as if anybody's been on a high deductible plan, which we have, when you're on that and it only covers 6 months, when we were looking at it, it made no sense, because you're going to just be paying out of pocket.
Yeah.
Because we would never meet the deductible unless something severe happened, knock on wood, so you always want to get Equity's health insurance is always amazing, because we call it like Cadillac health insurance, because
PPO, you can go to any doctor.
Yeah, it's great. Cigna.
Once you get there.
Right. So level A is like the previous, but you need 16 weeks within a calendar year to get the level A.
Mm-hmm.
But
you have to pay for it.
You pay $100 a month.
Yeah.
Well, it was higher, way higher than that.
Well, it was $100 a quarter, and then it went up to $100 a month, unless it's changed in the last year or so.
It has. I could that.
So so that level A is what everybody wants. And then they allowed some weeks to kind of carry over. But if you think about it,
the carryover formula, they were like letting if you didn't use them from last year, you could carry them over. Like, they're trying to help, but it's just like, wait a minute.
No.
Everyone's like, how long can I carry it into this month? How many days? Like, they're just, the math is not mathing.
Well, when you do the math, if you're on, the only way to have continuous health insurance as an actor is to be in a Broadway show.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're doing regional gig or a tour, something that's going to like open-ended run,
Vegas show, something.
But if you're doing regional or anything like that, everybody knows this. You can't book your next job until that show closes and you go back to New York to audition. And then you're usually auditioning for a show that's probably starting, even if you book right away, probably doesn't start for like 2, 3, 4 months down the road. So your insurance is probably going to lapse, or even if it didn't lapse, you haven't been accruing enough weeks to get into that next 6 months. So I even asked that we had a town hall after the basically when they opened up the doors to equity. And one of the questions I asked was, how are you going to help actors that primarily work in the regional market have continuous health insurance? Because Cobras are crazy. The Cobra is like $2,000 a month or something. Like you can't afford it. Again, the misalignment of how equity is protecting their members. If we're not healthy and we don't have health care, then if something happens, we don't have coverage to help us maintain our career.
So so they're asking for more money, which is not actually helping anybody other than the people in long runs on Broadway. And as we're seeing, and one of the reasons that spawned this whole conversation was the fact that, Broadway shows are closing quickly and not recouping their investments. They're choosing to close.
What was the story I just sent you? I can't remember.
It was
Tracey.
The Outsiders. The Outsiders, of all things, they
second musical. Is it the second since COVID to recoup? Let me look it up.
Look it up. I think it was more than the second, but it was in the 5, like within 5 or something like that.
Okay, let's see.
It's just, it's insane how many things have opened and closed at a loss.
Yeah.
And so, whenever we're hearing that, everything's closing at a loss, and people are like, oh gosh, Broadway isn't sustainable, and we all kind of look back and we're like, well, what is driving these prices? It doesn't seem to be that it's because of the cost of talent. And we keep looking at it, and we're looking at what actors are actually being paid, and actually then doing the math and being like, okay, maybe that's not outrageous,
I would wonder if you could find, I don't even know if I wouldn't know how to find this out. The nut, like the weekly nut of a show to break even on Broadway, a show that recently opened, like something that hasn't recouped and is like their nut is like $850,000 a week or whatever it is. Yeah. I would love to know what the percentage of that is of actors.
Well, and I think that is one of the things we keep talking about, and Michael and Emily that we talked to last week, we've all kind of formed a working group through the American Society for Theater Research to do just that, to try to figure out what's actually happening here. But as you know, producers are very, very tight-lipped about what their budgets actually look like. If you go back to, I think one of the first things that started this conversation was Cabaret. If you look back at Cabaret that just closed, it was a $20 million production to get it up and running, because it started in in the West End, didn't it?
Yep,
so it comes over here, and it was $20 million to start up. They made $90 million over
not very long,
like 9 months, and then they were like, "This is unsustainable. We cannot."
They ended up closing early.
Closing
early.
Yeah, so they closed early, and they did not pay back any of their investors of that $20 million. And the investors started to sue because they were like, "Wait a minute. Your reporting on the Broadway League says that you've made $90 million. And they're like, well, we have. And we're like, but where's that money going? And then you're looking at the number of actors, and I'm trying to do some math in my head and going, even if all of those actors were paid at twice what, the normal minimum for Broadway is.
Peanuts saying hi.
Hello, Peanut,
Hello.
the cat. It still is just like the math doesn't math at that point. So the one thing that we're starting to look into is inflation driving rent up, or what other machinations are going on behind the screen. But I mean, if you look back at the Cabaret case, they will not open the books. They're suing to keep their books closed.
Emily and Michael made a great point. Now, there again, they're looking at their task was to look at why are so many musicals now being developed in the West End, and so that was their project. But they made the great point in talking about developing a show, or I'm sorry, the outrageous expense to produce a show on Broadway. And the point that they made that really stopped me in my tracks was they pointed out that so many of the producers are also the theater owners. So there's a lot of they have a lot of motivation to keep things secret, right? To not necessarily be perfectly transparent with where all of the money is going. Before I move on, I do want to say Outsiders became the first musical to recoup its investment since & Juliet in 2022. So basically, post-pandemic, there have been 2 musicals to recoup. & Juliet and The Outsiders.
Wow.
Which then you kind of go, okay, so where are you getting these investors? Like, how do you have that record over, 5 years now? Only 2 recoup and pay back. So that means it's going to become even more insular, because if what's happening is that the theater owners are then becoming the producers. They're going to take a bigger and bigger part of that pie, because nobody wants to give money if they know it's going to go, right? Like, I'm not giving money to a Broadway show. I think we laughed one day when somebody was like, well, you guys like Broadway. I'm sure you've given. I'm like, I would never invest in a Broadway show.
It's like playing a roulette board.
Yeah.
Like 4 roulette boards.
But it's like, even on a show that you think should 100% make sense. Right now, Cabaret should make sense.
Yeah, perfect.
You're better off just going to take the money you're going to invest in the Broadway show and just buy scratch-off tickets.
Yes.
Yeah, right. But the other thing that came out that is increasingly, we're seeing more and more of, that is really troublesome to me, is we're not only seeing the explosion of cost to produce on Broadway, but we're also seeing, regional theaters and even this week in particular, Goodspeed Musicals announced that their smaller Terrace Theater space is not going to be producing, were they going to back off completely? Tracy, do you recall, or were they?
No, they're shutting
stopping production at Williamstown
What?
Theater Festival. They're not going. They're not doing anything in 2026.
Oh.
So these other, you think, it's a New York problem. But it's really not a New York problem. It's trickled down into these regional spaces, and that's going to have enormous impact on not only those members who are already part of Equity, the actors who are already part of Equity, but those actors that you're training, Michael and Tracy, that you're teaching at UCF and at schools across the country. They're preparing for an environment that is not conducive and scarily not conducive to making theater. So what do we do about it? How do we figure out what is at the root of this issue so that we can try to solve the problem?
Yeah.
Vote.
Trump?
Vote.
Well, I also think that a good, huge part of this is just like, I'm not against producers making money. I'm not against actors making money. I want all of these people to, I want everybody to thrive. I think there is a way to do that. But it does take something like what, the United Kingdom is doing, which is saying our art is important. We want to be seen, we want people to understand our values, and we want to make sure that those values go out across the world, because that is cultural diplomacy, and cultural diplomacy is the best diplomacy we have.
Can I ask a question about
that? They are giving huge tax, like 50% tax breaks.
Massive.
That's what I was going to ask. The two things that I'm not 100% sure if I'm correct on this, but I think what you're saying is right. From what I understand, there's either government funding or there's some type of government support for the arts in the UK, which helps the cost go down.
That's right.
And
secondly, I was going to say the second thing, I know I haven't talked to them in forever, but I had 2 friends that I did the International West Side tour that perform on the West End. One of my friends, Charlie, she was in Matilda in the West End, and Billy Elliot in the West End. I know that she talks about what actors get paid in New York. The actors in London, and London's really expensive to live, but she had to maintain two additional jobs outside of her West End show job, teaching dance at two different studios because her paycheck from her West End, she was in the ensemble and she was a dance captain of Billy Elliot. And her paycheck for that was not enough to sustain to pay her rent. So she had to get a second job. So I do
gets
want to show
bigger,
that as
doesn't
well.
it?
I'm thinking, Tracey, this is interesting because it's not trickling down. Okay, so we've got these tax incentives, which are wonderful in the UK to produce theater there, but who's it benefiting? It's not benefiting the actors, apparently.
Yeah.
So who's
so
it
many-
benefiting?
Where's this money
Now,
going?
what we would have to do, Michael, when was that? It was probably, when was the tour you were on with her?
So I was on tour with her in 2010.
Okay.
So she was doing Billy Elliot after that, Matilda after that, and stuff
Okay.
like that. So
So
yeah.
this program started 2013. I think the first money, they announced it 2013. The first money came out 2014. But that would be really something to look into, Tracey, to talk to Emily and Michael about, to see how has the bottom line for actors changed in the UK in light of these tax incentives,
light of
or is
'cause
it
that was
just
beforehand.
helping the producers?
Like when was that tax incentive
So
put into
that
play?
tax went into
14.
13,
20, well, they announced it 2013, and then I think the first money was distributed 2014.
2014, and then in 2020 it went from 20, like what was it, like
22% to 45%.
to 45, and then they just made it that permanent because
They
of
made it a permanent.
after
They were gonna-
COVID.
Yeah, it was they, post pandemic, it was just going to be a let's get theater back on their feet thing. And then when it was time for it to go away, everybody kind of was, upset about it. And so they made it a permanent thing. And the reason, the kind of, I guess, I don't know what his title is, but basically a minister of culture said that, we see these as cultural exports. Basically, we are
Cultural
preserving
diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly. And so we want to put our money where our mouth is. And it sounds great, but it is a very interesting point that you raised, Michael. I wonder if the bottom line for actors has changed.
It's also
like it
interesting.
has for producers.
It's also interesting because in the West End, the only reason I know this is because when I was in grad school, in my history of directing class, I wrote a paper, and one of my papers had a lot to do with Ivo Van Hove's productions.
Okay.
And he does like really out there, like crazy, like out there versions of shows. And when I was researching him, one of the reasons he's able to do that is because of the government support of theater and not when we look at Broadway shows and we see like the movie musicals and we're like, how is that going to be a musical? And we always say, why isn't an original show being done? Or why isn't something new, challenging being done? And then we see it being done in the West End.
Every time. It's always in the West End. Every single time.
But he said in this paper I wrote about like how he talks about, well, I'm able to do that because I don't have the pressure of that. But again, the actor thing, I do know that actors now it'd be interesting to compare the cost of living in London and New York, because I actually think London might be more expensive than New York, which is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it is interesting to kind of try to get it to where we can make an apples to apples comparison, so that we can really see.
And that's obviously a really, really hard. It's a hard thing to quantify because every actor's journey is so different.
Yeah.
So it's like one of the things I learned in writing this paper that spurred this whole conversation was just the fact that it's like, okay, we're going to take this as we have to make a whole bunch of rules just to make any predictions, and a lot of those rules had to be like, to be a working actor, you have to have worked this many weeks at this level of contract, and then it's like you're trying to use, this metric and that metric to make sure that, those things actually work in the cities that they're living in. And it's just because there's nothing standardized about it. It's really, really hard to say, oh, you're an actor in the West End. Okay, how many weeks did you work this year? What do we put down as an average, and can you live on that there? And then because it just doesn't quite work the same way. Yeah. But I think one of the things that this debunks is just the fact that How many people were in the Matilda tour with you? Do you remember off the top of your head? How many actors? How many people on equity contracts?
Everybody was on
Well, I mean, it's
equity.
full union, but the kids,
Even the kids were on equity contract. And well, the tutors and everybody who works backstage was not on an equity contract.
There's 8. So if you give me a second, I can count in my head.
But it's just like,
well, because I was dance captain, so
yeah, because you were like, how am I doing this? So this is what AI told me. This is the first paper I've ever used AI on, and it's very, very scary. And part of that is because most of the work in the United States for actors is non-union, and there's nothing that's tracking it whatsoever. And so I built this thing in AI that went through, and I said, okay, find all the regional theaters that have like how many musicals do they do? Okay, do all of that. Now we're going to say what's the average number of people in a musical? And AI picked 35. I don't know how it picked 35, but it picked 35.
That sounds about right.
And I kind of was like, having done enough musicals in my day, I was like, that's, that'll average out. Maybe I'll go with you on that AI. But then trying to kind of come up with how much money that's going to cost just in paychecks, not how much it is to insure them, not how much it is to deal with, the infrastructure of the theater and the rental of the lighting and the sound, like all the rest of it, which we know costs an arm and a leg. But just trying to kind of come up with that number, there's no way to get accurate numbers on it at all.
I think Matilda had 32 when because I know that there was because I was kind of going through my head. I think there were sorry, hitting our cat.
Okay.
I think there were 32, and I would say that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Like if you add swings, I would say a smaller show would probably have 22 on stage with probably 4 swings. Some like the 25 to 28 range, 26, 28. The bigger musicals, I would guess anywhere from 32 to 36, somewhere on there. Now you're also adding in vacation swings and universal swings with some Broadway shows, so that will add to that, But that sounds about right, like 34 in a standard musical.
And I
like
just
Legally
think that
Blonde
it's
had. I was gonna say Legally Blonde had 28 on stage and 4 swings, so 32.
Yeah.
That I know.
So then you start doing the math, even if you start doing it on, Broadway equity contracts, you start looking at that, and then you compare that against what they're bringing in and going, wow, there's just, and that's where Kristin lives. Kristin checks how much money they're making every day, I swear.
No, I love an inflation calculator. That's what she's saying. I love an inflation calculator. No, but you know what, Tracey, I think this is a really interesting point. I do track the grosses. But what occurs to me is size of cast. And I wonder if that has changed because, you think Oklahoma and Anything Goes and Music Man, and those are huge casts. But another thing that has become something that producers seem to praise is a smaller ensemble kind of cast.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if we could look, we would have to narrow the parameters of the search here, but I wonder if the size of the companies have decreased as the sizes of these budgets have increased, because it seems to me like they have.
No, they have 100%.
Well, and on top of it, when we're teaching students now, I tell the students, when I started out, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, I didn't have to cover principal roles. I did on like 1 or 2, but there were many times when I was either like swing and dance captain or I was ensemble. I would say, if I would be curious about Beetlejuice, but I think every single person is covering a principal role now because ensembles have gotten smaller. There's no room for somebody not to cover something. So you can't just be like an incredible dancer, an okay singer, and you can't, you wouldn't really play you have to be able to hold a role because you're understudying something.
Well, and I don't want to bring up like how many people were in Showboat in Oklahoma. So,
Well,
Oh my gosh.
like when they opened.
Ragtime, the original Ragtime.
Exactly. Those
It's
companies
also-
were huge.
What they don't, it's like, and they don't pay actors more, so everything else is going up. In my opinion, like obviously they did in Showboat time and Ragtime in the beginning, but like to me, it's the sets, it's the music, it's the directors. I mean, those guys are making a pretty penny.
Yeah.
Like, they are.
Yeah.
I was with Alex Timbers, love him,
Yeah.
he's the best. But that man makes it.
He's doing very well, right?
He's doing great, and he's also making royalties. Like, get it, Alex? So jelly.
Yeah.
So good. But like,
Yeah. Well, but it's so interesting because I can see that just again, remembering what we talked about with Emily and Michael last week, like, I just wonder, we know the actors aren't getting a bigger piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
And you would suppose, because one of the things that Tracey and I have talked about as we've gone through and done deep dives into all of these, whether it's a jukebox musical or it's a movie adaptation, part of the reason why you would think those would be very appealing to producers is because in some way they're shortcutting the work of the development of the show. Now, on the one hand, of course, it has name ID, and we know that's a big piece of it. But in addition, if it's a jukebox musical, you presumably, other than paying for rights, nobody's creating anything from scratch in terms of music and lyrics, right? With a film, they're not developing a new story. There's adaptations, of course, and they're tweaking and all of that. I understand that. But it's not entirely from scratch. So you would think that would result in cost savings if you're, in the case of Back to the Future, you're working with the screenwriter from Back to the Future, telling his story, right? Like, how is it somehow all of these costs are exploding when we're actually doing things that would seemingly cut costs, right? And we know that the we've already discussed that the actors are not getting the bigger piece of the pie.
Well, and let's look at some other unions. I mean, when you're looking at IATSE and you're looking at the musicians union and stuff like that,
fair.
and the they just have more power than Actors Equity, but somebody told me this once, I mean, you can even talk about this about your understudy costumes, like Leslie, a costume plot, like a dress or a suit or whatever is being made, that suit probably in a non-union world would cost, I don't know, let's say $1,000, whatever. And
my gosh.
But it's cost, but
I know.
but let's say that.
But yes.
And then you hear about a Broadway costume cost, like the same thing, costing $10,000 or $12,000 because you have 30. What I've been told is because you have like 20 different people in the union making different things. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't get that, but what I'm saying is that if that's costing that much for that, why isn't some of that being thought of for the actors? When your costume plot for your understudy stuff was nowhere near what Leslie Kritzer is. Yeah.
My understudy costume, which was taken in and made to fit me really well, was bought off Amazon. Like, there's just a
Yes.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Come on. Yeah.
And go on YouTube and watch Leslie Kritzer playing the role, and then you can find videos of Kim Sava playing Delia in Beetlejuice, and then put them right next to each other, and they're not going to look that much different.
Nope.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna feel different though.
You're going to feel different.
Can I say something? Her costume was like $12,000. Okay.
Wow.
Mine was like 35. So it's, I guess it just depends, like, on what they want to spend their money on. And they, our costume designer also made a lot of money.
Right.
So
It's just interesting when you think about those things, and then you start to go, okay, well, what other parts of the show are like that? The lighting, the sound, the this,
And how they are, I mean, every
everything's divvied
update
up.
that you have to do to the technical, like, I mean, even if with a show that's running for a long period of time, if, we update lighting, if we update lighting boards, if things like that come out, then we have to do an entire new swap and a new rental and like that kind of stuff. How does that impact it? It just seems like it just seems like everything that we get to read about Broadway, it's like, oh, the actors union is fighting for more money. The actors union is fighting for more money. And that is not where the money is being spent.
It's frustrating because, in the academic world, we really try as best as we can to really talk about the equity of a show being done. Front of house is just as important as the backstage, just as important as your wardrobe crew, just as important as important as the musicians. And we want everybody to learn how this team puts this together. But when you look at the financial packages and let's say, okay, let's put this in this bucket and this bucket and this bucket, I'll bet you that the actors' percentage per person is considerably less than all the others.
And that, while I agree with you that we can't do it alone, right? It takes all of us working together.
We just can't do it alone.
That's right. But what strikes me is that the ones that are front facing are the actors, right? And so you would think they would at least be equitably compensated, right? And not be towards the lower end of the scale. If everybody's got a bucket, you would think theirs would be just as full as all the others.
But I mean, it's always like, this is what we talk about in theater history all the time. I'm like, who are we demonizing in this moment? Like, how are we deflecting attention away from what's happening? Like, I tell them, look at the newspaper articles, look at what's being said. In this particular case, if you're looking at it in the same way, it's like, why are we so focused on the actors? And it's because you are forward facing, because how many people think about the Stitchers and the electrics, and how many people know about people who are, do all the programming for Q Lab and all of that kind of stuff, where it's like, you just kind of go, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to say, oh, it's absolutely impossible to do anything on Broadway because IATSE, it's too much money. Like, they're not doing that because nobody would have any concept of who that is, right? It's like, let's look
That's
at
fair.
Let's
So
look
they're
at
the easy
forward-facing
scapegoat.
people. Like, it's an easy thing to say, but we don't see a whole lot of people pointing fingers at other, parts of the process.
I hypothetically asked this at one point. This is a while back. I said, would Kim says it sometimes that I lean towards the producers sometimes when I'm thinking, and there's certain things that I will say is that the producers and investors and stuff are putting the money up front and taking that risk. We as actors and stuff like that, we are taking the risk with our body, injury, and this and that. But I've always wondered, similar to the touring model, I wonder if Broadway actors would take less money in a salary, and then that we would get overages, like almost that wouldn't work in Broadway. Like, the overages are because of the guarantee that the tours get in each city. But I wonder if there was a way to get a percentage of the box office and make less, and then we're actually risking a little bit because we believe in this project. But if it hits, then you're gonna make more money. It goes along with I got this up because of the model of the difference between the lab versus the workshop contract, and how that shifted because actors really wanted more money up front instead of the workshop contract.
Because you were making pennies.
I mean, I know
workshops are great, but
I know two actors. One of them I know very, very well that did both Book of Mormon workshops because they were workshop contracts. So he's sharing 1.5 points. He's part of 1.5 points.
Wow.
He makes $8,000 a month without doing anything.
Wow.
That's back in 2013.
Wow. Well, and another risk that you are taking as an actor is you're foregoing other jobs, right? There are times when you are taking one contract over another, and you don't know which one is going to hit and which one is going to miss, and hopefully you choose the right one, but there's definitely risk involved in that. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlivable.
I mean, I think that there's so many things that the Actors Equity could fight for that are non-financial. Like you've even talked about this when we were doing Beetlejuice about how many shows and rehearsals and this and that. I'm actually for, like, if there was a way to give everybody, it's hard to kind of manage this, but I think everybody should get one show off a month paid. Meaning, like, you're in the building, like a swing would go on once a week, or like maybe you're doing like 7 shows a week, or you're doing like 13 shows, or it'd be 16. You're doing 15 shows in 2 weeks instead of 16, and then negotiate that so that maybe actors are not killing their body. I mean, choreography is 10 times harder nowadays than it was 15 years ago. What they're asking actors to do. I mean, Moulin Rouge.
Oh yeah.
Hamilton, like, they're broken.
Beetlejuice. Stupid. I mean, really fun, but like,
but super fun. Yeah.
Not 8 shows a week. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable.
Kristin, since Tracey said that you're the person that you really look at the butt, because I don't look at the weekly. I'm not an actor anymore, so I don't really look at the weekly grosses and stuff anymore. How is Mamma Mia doing right now? Do you know?
I don't know offhand. I can look though.
The only reason I ask this is because I'm very curious if Broadway is going to go to a touring model where what Beetlejuice and Mamma Mia just did, where
Which
they're going to
was
send...
weird, and like that cost. Okay, so if you don't know what happened, all of a sudden on the national tour of Beetlejuice came and did a sit down run on Broadway, which was great because one of my students, shout out Sophie Atkin, like gets to say now that she worked on Broadway.
Yeah,
but,
a lot of Broadway debuts.
But that's what Mamma Mia did too.
But like, it's like, wait a minute, now we're all gonna wait, what? Like, this changes everything.
That's why I'm wondering if certain Broadway houses are going to become a touring stop.
Yeah.
But then let's talk about this. Those actors, so they're on technically a tour.
And they're not getting paid Broadway.
They're not getting per diem either.
No.
Right.
What?
No. So they're not getting the finances of it. It was like, okay, I remember kind of seeing the conversation between lots of former students on it and going, okay, so I'm not getting the money I would get if this was a Broadway show, but I am here. I can say that I have performed on Broadway now.
They're changing their point of origin for the contract to be New York, so it's not a tour.
So they're not making tour money and they're not making production money. They're just making enough to not even pay their bills.
I'm not sure what they did on Beetlejuice. I know on Mamma Mia they actually closed. Technically the tour closed.
Okay.
And then they had 4 weeks off and they shifted to a Broadway contract so that they didn't have to pay per diem. That I know but I don't know about Beetlejuice. I know because one of my students is a Caro Attias.
But she eventually made Broadway production.
They're on a Broadway contract, but what I say about that is, but it still was a limited run.
Okay.
It's not an open-ended run. Now they might keep extending, but you have actors that now don't have an apartment.
Yeah, no. What?
They don't know how long the show is going to be in New York. Is it going to go back on the road? They don't know. Do I sign a lease on a contract? Do I sublet? They're not getting help with housing like they would on tour. There's a lot of problems with that model.
Yikes.
Yeah, and it does just kind of fall onto the actors to figure
And the
it out
producers don't
themselves.
think about those things. They're just like, we're going to Broadway.
Yeah.
Michael, to answer your question about Mamma Mia, it has never been less than 95% full since it opened August 3rd of 2025.
Wow.
So it's
it's doing well. So they'll probably it was supposed to be a limited run.
Yeah.
They'll probably say it's a limited run to sell tickets, and then when they sell to the point, then they'll probably be like extending for a limited time,
right,
to get people to buy more tickets.
I just did a workshop with the Sophie. Was her name Sophie?
What
The lead.
the Sophie and Mamma Mia is
Yeah.
the lead.
Yeah.
I just did a workshop with her, and this is her Broadway debut.
Yeah.
This is her Broadway
There's
debut.
the
Yeah.
Dustin thing, what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dust and Shadows. Yeah. I mean, she was great. I'm sure she's lovely as a Sophie. And this is a great opportunity for these actors to
Yeah.
be on a first national tour and then all of a sudden just be like, surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mamma Mia, I think 17 of them are making their
Yeah,
Broadway
there was
debut.
13
No, it's-
in Broadway.
I
the
recall
same
the
thing
same with
happened.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
With the
Same.
Beetlejuice.
And
Yeah.
I have, I think, 3 students on that particular, and we were just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you're going
I
to
mean,
Broadway. And it's like, oh dear.
it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
It does pose a lot of problems for the future of
Right.
Broadway and the tours, and just performers in general. So
Well, and this is not listed. This is going to kind of be tangential off of like the Broadway market. But when Actors Equity opened the door so that anybody can join, and again, there was the town hall where we could ask questions. I think the most percentage question asked was, how are you going to create more jobs?
we still ask that.
And they can't. And on top of it, theaters are closing because regional stock, because of different reasons, But if you're not creating more jobs, this is why I thought Kate Schindel was misaligned, was because she thought if everybody's in the union, then everybody's going to have to hire union.
And pay
But
dues and
yeah, but Tracy, you've told me this.
But I can
With
tell
the
you from the
BFA
numbers.
programs,
Yeah.
there's every year there's this flood of talent coming out that want jobs. So you're not, again, we don't have any power.
In 50 of the 150 BFA programs in the United States that I have found, I know that Michael thinks that
I think
he's
it's
counted
205.
205. But out of 50 of those programs, we graduate enough people to take all the jobs on Broadway and replace them every 7.5 years. If you think about that, that's that in 50 of those programs. So in 1/3 of those programs, we do that. And we have no idea what's going on in the other programs because they are not in NAST. Right? Those are only the NAST programs.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
wow.
Hey, Tracy, for our listeners, would you define NAST, please?
It's the National Association of Schools of Theater. You're right, I hadn't done that.
No, that's okay.
But we're creating, and I think that's another reason this hasn't kind of caught up to producers yet, is because we have created. Michael's already said, he's like, I'm glad that I was doing this in the time that I was doing this.
Yeah.
We made a chart basically that shows the rapid explosion of how many BFA musical theater majors that we are creating. It's just absolutely insane. It's like we went from, in 2000, those the NAST programs every year, 105 BFA in musical theater. In 2020 or in 2022, 500 BFA musical theater majors in just those 50 programs. And you just kind of go, okay, this is it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but there's such because we've created such a glut of performers or people who want to perform and are going out there and are auditioning and everything, it's not catching up to the producers because there's always going to be somebody else to grab. And as Kim said early, it's not talent. Like, everybody's talented. It's just like, and so when somebody's like, okay, I'm frustrated, I've done this now, I am not getting paid what I need to get paid to give myself health insurance and to have an apartment and not live in, I mean,
all
I talk
normal
about
worries.
I talk
normal.
I talk about, I have a former student who was the lead and got a Tony nomination like right out of college. And like, he's like, what? I still live in my apartment with all of my, undergrad buddies because I can't afford more than that. It's like, once they get to the point where there's like, I'm not going to be able to get out of this. Once they decide to move on, maybe they decide to go back to grad school. Maybe they decide to move in, somewhere tangential to performance. There's always there's like 15 people to take their place. And so it never, like, the actual economics of whether or not this is sustainable has not hit, because there's so many people who love it and want to do it. But we're not creating, like, what we've basically done in academia. And this is kind of what I argued at our conference in November, was that we're creating a whole bunch of people who want to be performers, and we're not creating musical theater audiences anymore. We're just creating a whole bunch of people who want to perform, and that's great, because they will become the audiences, but will they have the jobs that will allow them to pay the prices to see it?
Wow,
and then you
full
kind of
circle.
go, okay, so what's going to happen next? So I just think that musical theater is so much more beloved than people realize. People are like, oh, whatever, it's just theater. And I'm like, no, there are a lot of audiences. If you look at the audience numbers that even the Broadway League puts out, they're all like, oh, Broadway audiences haven't recovered. Yes, they have. Your numbers are more than they were beforehand. Like, they have recovered. You're all good.
And in touring houses, I can tell you,
they've exploded.
Gangbusters.
Yeah.
Gangbusters.
So that's not an issue, but how are we replacing them?
Yeah. Tracey, I won't say the school, but a student auditioned for our program as a transfer. And she's transferring out of a school that has a class size of 90.
Oh my gosh.
It's like a top tier school.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. I went, what?
How do you do it? I mean, but when I was at Point Park, we were constantly fighting that, because they're like, more people want to come in, and we're like, but we only have this many professors, and I can only see this many people. Like, we can't do more than that. So there's a large volume of students who want to learn how to do this. That's not the issue, right? That's not, it never has. Where
are the jobs?
But there aren't jobs. And
that's
the issue.
And livable wages. I mean,
it's like these ensembles, like you said, the ensembles are getting smaller.
Yes.
And there are theaters that are closing all over the country.
Yeah.
And there's more and more students coming. And it's like the jobs are shrinking, and then there's more and more students. So it's just this vicious cycle of unemployed, unhappy actors.
And here's another thing that's going to happen, and I think this is actually going to super impact academia first, and then we're going to see what rolls out later. But on July 1st, this great new law that I have no idea how they're going to manage, and it makes absolutely no sense how they're going to manage, goes into effect. That basically says, oh, bless you.
Thank you.
That the graduates that you graduate out of your program in in a university, they have to meet the minimum, like at least what somebody on minimum wage could in those first 3 years. They have to at least meet or exceed that, or you will not get, or people can't get loans to go to your program.
Okay.
So that's that loan. Now, I don't think that's. Here's the thing. I don't think that was actually that was actually started by the Biden administration. I don't think it's necessarily an awful thing, but for something like theater, where it stands right now, basically what happened was in 2008, when the recession hit, all the deans were like, you need to do a musical theater program because it's going to bring in money. And so everybody put in a musical theater program. So now we have all of these musical theater majors. None of them are going to hit those markers. So I think what's going to happen is it will thin that out. Like, I mean, the market will take care of that if this kind of governance rule goes into play. But it's a hard rule, and it's harsh on other people, and then there's all sorts of other fallout. So I don't know
how you would track that, because even not even theater, like anybody. Yeah, I guess,
know.
Unless you have I guess AI, maybe something is going to track W-2 forms and figure out where people are working and this
That's
and
the
that.
only thing that we've been able to figure out. I'm like, how are you doing this? You just have some sort of tracker on, like, are you getting information from the state schools that say, here are the majors that they have, and then are you pulling their W-2s?
Yeah.
Like, because that's the only way to pull it at that point. So,
And would you have to be working in the career that you
no,
went
it's
to
just
school
like,
for? So
just
Yeah.
like,
I could be a server.
again, I don't know how they're actually going to make this work.
Yeah.
Weird.
But it's still on track to go into effect. So it is something that you just kind of go, okay, if something like that went into effect, that would change the economics of it. We would have to respond to that. I think it's so early, even though it's like the date is July 1st of this year. I'm always like, yeah, there's no way that's actually going to actually come online for years at this point. But is the threat of it going to help thin it out? I don't know.
Maybe.
I think that
Parents being like, you're not going to school for that.
Yeah.
I mean we had, I mean, at least at UCF, I mean, we auditioned like over 700 students and we choose 16.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, it's like that's how much interest is there, you know. It's
But all it's going to take is them not defunding, but saying to one musical theater program, we're not going to allow anybody to take loans to go to your program. It just takes one to then start the panic, right? And everybody's going to have to reframe.
It's interesting, circling back to something we talked about, because it just popped in my head, you know, with Actors Equity and like thinking of like how to support actors in a more career-based model, like in some way, shape, or form, there needs, in my opinion, there needs to be more support of like trying to help create more opportunities outside of New York in regional theater and stock. I think that the only reason I know this percentage is because of going into academia. I needed to have numbers when I'm introduced in interviewing for jobs, and then also for tenure portfolio and this and that. I know that when I did the math way back when, and not too long ago, that only 5% of actors in the union will have done a Broadway show.
Oh, I think it's even less than that.
3% are actors that will have done more than one Broadway show. But when you think about that, 95% of actors in Actors Equity will have never walked on a Broadway show. I say this to my students because when I say you don't have to work on Broadway to be successful. There's many different facets of the industry, but if the union would look at those percentages, and if they would actually somehow find a way to support
Regional
theater I don't know what that answer is, but to expand the regional market and help theaters expand that market with stock and different things, because that's that's where actors are going to create their resume, are going to create longevity of career, not on Broadway.
But then it's like you look at kind of what's happening to all the cultural funding in all of the states. You know, I mean, cultural money for nationally is down, obviously, but even in the states, it's moving. Just heard yesterday that Pittsburgh, where I was a couple years ago, their 3 major Lort theaters are trying to consolidate into one because they just can't make it work anymore. And these are big name theater. Like, these are big theaters who hire equity actors who do that kind of stuff. But it's like, if we have such a glut of people who want to do this and love this art form, but yet, you know, we can't make this actually work via capitalism. Like, it only works if you've got art and capitalism that stay strong against one another, and it feels like we're very out of balance. And I mean, it's obvious if this is something that we want to thrive, then we're gonna need to do something about it, because it's not gonna necessarily right itself at this point.
Yeah, I know. Again, vote. Yeah. I mean,
I think with the takeaway from these two seminar episodes, which are Kim and Michael, for your sake, the seminar episode is something new that we're doing where we get to have conversations like this, just based on themes that have recurred as Tracey and I have done our normal episodes. And now we're getting to pull in some experts to get them to weigh in on some of the things that we keep seeing. And I think that the takeaway from both last week's seminar and this week's is that this is a massively complicated subject on both sides of the pond. I mean, it seemed in talking to Emily and Stephen last week that it was euphoric, some kind of utopia over there in the UK. But then as we've kind of peeled back the onion here in our conversation about equity specifically, you realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe it's not, I mean, it's great, but maybe there are some pieces of this puzzle that we're not considering. So it's a very, very complicated conversation. And I was hoping that we would come to some sort of resolution and we'd solve all the world's problems tonight in an hour.
We're gonna
I don't think we're gonna get there.
Make it bigger. We're gonna make the puzzle bigger is what we're gonna do.
Right. Instead, that's the truth. I have written down so many other things like, oh, we need to look at this. This is part of it. I didn't think about this. This is part of it.
So we need more seminar episodes.
We need more seminar episodes. That's
You know
right.
who you should talk to is my friend Chris Nunez.
Okay. I'll write it down.
I can connect you with him. Chris is one of my close friends. We went to grad school together. He was a year ahead of me. He is working in Detroit right now with the touring. He's working at the Fisher with their Broadway across America. He's in their lane because he moved to Detroit. But before that he was with Disney Theatricals, where he was working with the tour. He was like, I forget his title, like general manager of touring, because he was in charge of like all the tours. But before that he was company manager of the Phantom in Vegas. He company managed Rock of Ages in Vegas. He helped produce Magic Mike in Vegas. So he's got a lot of perspective from that side. And he's very knowledgeable.
That's very interesting. And that is one thing that I was thinking was we need to hear from that side of things, because we're hearing from an academic perspective, from an equity perspective. We need to hear from a producer's perspective. So that would be fantastic. Well, as we wrap up this seminar, I wonder, Michael, Kim, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share with us? Tracey, anything that you want to share to wrap us up, or are we ready to call it a night?
I'm done. I keep looking at all the stats and I'm like, I'm done. I need to sleep on this now. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. Michael said that he's so glad that he got into the business when he did. I just remember thinking and hearing when I was getting into the business, they were like, oh God, so many people in this business, like so flooded, and that was what, 2000. I'm aging myself, but like 2008, when I was like in New York and I was in the thick of it and I was going to those union auditions. And I just remember equity actors being like, oh, so many people at this audition, I can't get in. It's just, so I guess it's a matter of me saying like, it's always been hard,
Right.
and it will continue to always be hard.
Yeah.
So don't give up if this is something that you really want to do. I would say just
well, it's that commitment. That commitment you talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, life has evolved. I mean, the world has evolved, obviously. I mean, I joined the union in '99. And when I joined the union, the only way to get into the union, there were no EMC points back then, which you don't need them anymore. The only way you could get into the union is you had to audition and book a job that was a union contract. It's the only way you could get in.
Yeah.
So the fight to get in the union, but it also, I know that we want everything to be equitable in this, but it also allowed that it made it harder to be a professional actor, which also didn't allow just this flood to overwhelm the industry.
Yes.
So I don't know, like, what is better?
Yeah.
And I actually will leave this on a positive to say that, like what Kim did is like, I love theater. I loved working on Broadway, but I also loved working on regional, and I loved working on stock. I think when you're an artist, it's got to be, it's inside you. It's what you, it's part of who you are, and that's why you do it. And I think that, yeah, people just need to keep doing it and not have any regrets. I think you need to keep fighting for what you deserve. And I think that hopefully there will be some way, shape, or form that they figure out the Broadway model to be a little bit more sustainable. So more than only the hit can run for at least a year, because when you're an actor and you book that Broadway show, it's not all, yes, especially if it's your first one, it is about, oh my God, I did that. It's technically the pinnacle of musical theater, like what you would think of. But then it's disheartening when the show closes in 3 months, because you think you booked a Broadway show, you're going to be employed for at least a year. I mean, when I was in Crybaby, it was crazy that we didn't win a Tony Award, and I walked into on Tuesday after the Tonys and was out of a job on Sunday.
Yeah.
It's so I hope that somehow, some way, they find a way to allow actors, when they book a Broadway show, that more than just one show a year can run for a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, listen, it has been such a treat to talk with y'all tonight and to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much for sharing them with us as we, like I said, I thought this might kind of put a bow on the conversation, and instead it has just expanded it. And I'm really grateful for that, because that gives Tracey and I as researchers so many more avenues to explore. So thank you for that. And on that note, that'll do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in for our next seminar episode, which is a discussion with author Barry Joseph, who's written a new book called Matching Minds with Sondheim. It should be a fascinating conversation. Regular episodes will return in early March. And until then, you can connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com or on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.